Before we get started on the video, there will be spoilers for the 1000-Year Blood War arc of Bleach to follow. Ever since it was revealed that Ichigo's dumb old dad, Isshin, was in fact a secret Shinigami, and a captain no less, questions have circled pretty much endlessly. And while Kubo did an admirable job in answering almost all of those questions thanks to a flashback mini-arc called Everything But the Rain, some still remain. For example, what's the deal with Isshin's zanpakuto, Engetsu? While on the surface it may appear to be its own individual blade with its own unique powers, Engetsu is revealed to be a fire-type zanpakuto, which on first glance would seemingly make it completely separate from Ichigo's own Zangetsu. It's quite clearly not as simple as that. For one thing, the zanpakuto shared between father and son, Engetsu and Zangetsu respectively, quite clearly share similar naming conventions, with their names meaning Scathing Moon and Slaying Moon. The similarities in their names are so blatant as to be clearly done on purpose to draw a connection between the two of them, while Isshin even goes so far as to use GETSUGA TENSHO, an attack that until that very moment had previously been exclusively Ichigo's signature move. So Kubo was clearly drawing parallels between Ichigo and Isshin's zanpakuto, but why? What does it mean? Can there be a familial connection between zanpakuto, and if so, do any other Shinigami in the Soul Society share one as well? And are special abilities hereditary rather than related to zanpakuto alone? Well, the truth is we still don't have any crystal clear answers as to how this works or what any of it really means, but recently Kubo spoke out on his Club Outside Q&A platform as to the matter, giving us a little bit of much needed insight. So let's take a look at what he had to say. Kubo was asked the question as follows. As with the case of Isshin's Engetsu and Ichigo's Zangetsu, are names and characteristics of a zanpakuto similar between parents and their children? And Kubo's answer was, not just in the case of a parent and their child, but the zanpakuto can also be somewhat similar between those with a blood connection. And again, this translation was from M Shadows, and again, the link can be found in the description. So, perhaps surprisingly here, Kubo actually expands on it a little bit for once. He confirms that not only are the names and characteristics of a zanpakuto similar between parents and their children, but also potentially between anyone with a blood connection. It's interesting to me that some of the similarities between Zangetsu and Engetsu are so completely overt, like the fact they share the power to use GETSUGA TENSHO, and also supposedly the final GETSUGA TENSHO as well. Yet Engetsu is an almost totally different type of weapon to Ichigo's own zanpakuto, in that it has an obvious actual elemental power to it. Also, it is kind of funny to me as well that almost everything that was once unique to Zangetsu is in fact replicated in Engetsu, in terms of their abilities at least anyway. And at least as of the second half of the 1000-Year Blood War arc, Ichigo is beginning to differentiate himself a bit more. For example, I assume that it's impossible for Engetsu to ever perform GETSUGA Jujisho, as that ability came about as a result of Ichigo now donning two blades, a symbol of his true power. So, at least Ichigo has that, and of course Ichigo has his innate hollow abilities as well, which change up his sword even further, so that helps to further separate Zangetsu from Engetsu. I wonder how this actually works though. I suppose on a conceptual, metaphysical level, it's basically saying that you share a part of your soul with those with whom you share a blood connection, a familial connection. But you're also still your own person, hence Engetsu's fiery strength. A zanpakuto is supposed to be a reflection of you, of your very soul, of what makes you who you are, so I guess what they're basically saying here is that your family helps to shape you as well. And that does make total sense to me. The fact Kubo branched out beyond just parent and child to anyone within your extended family essentially does make everything a bit more interesting, however, and it makes me want to explore the possibilities. And so, speaking of which then, what other familial connections are there in the Soul Society? While the obvious ones that come to mind immediately are of course Kazui Kurosaki and Ichika Abarai, the children of Ichigo and Orihime and Rukia and Renji. And where Kazui is concerned, we can already see evidence of his zanpakuto sharing some characteristics with Ichigo's Zangetsu. In chapter 686, when he transforms into his Shinigami attire, we can see his sealed zanpakuto on his back, and the guard is shaped like a slightly softer variation of Ichigo's former bankai guard design, in the style of the Japanese kanji for ban. So, presumably, Kazui's own zanpakuto will probably end in Getsu as well, and maybe he can use GETSUGA TENSHO too. What's interesting about this, though, is that Ichigo's new true zanpakuto, his dual-bladed Zangetsu in both Shikai and Bankai, doesn't have any semblance of this symbol on it at all anymore. Now, is that because this guard shape predominantly reflected Ichigo's Shinigami powers, as we saw in the Fullbring arc when it took the shape of that form for his Reiatsu? And now that he's accepted his powers as one, Shinigami Hollow and Quincy as all Zangetsu in their entirety, they fuse together in a more cohesive way and perhaps have lost that icon of Ichigo's former identity. I mean, it's definitely a little mind-bending even when laying it all out like this, and in fact, this is where things get a little more confusing. Even if that were the case, if that were the reason why Ichigo's Zangetsu no longer has that shape of guard, Kazui is Ichigo's son, born of Ichigo's own blood, so he should also be a hybrid like his father. However, of Isshin's own children, only Ichigo seems to have inherited that special nature. While Karin is spiritually aware, neither she nor Yuzu are the same special makeup that Ichigo is, despite being descended from the same parents, Isshin and Masaki, who as we know contain traces of all the spiritual races of Bleach. So what I'm getting at is it's clearly not a guarantee that one's hybrid nature will be passed on to their children, even if Kazui is clearly extraordinarily powerful, able to snuff out the remnants of Yhwach's own Reiatsu. But Kazui is similar to Ichigo in that he's only born of one Shinigami parent. Meanwhile, Ichika's parents, Rukia and Renji, both have their own completely unique, completely separate zanpakuto. So, does that dilute Ichika's chances for a totally individual weapon? Will her zanpakuto have elements of both Zabimaru and Sode no Shirayuki? Will one of those be more dominant than the other? Or will she have traces of neither of them? Well, I think that question has actually already been partially answered too. When we see Ichika for the first time, again in chapter 686, she draws her zanpakuto, and we see the guard is shaped like a lightning bolt. This is very similar, but again slightly more chibified, a little bit like Kazui's guard. It's very similar to the design that appears on Zabimaru's own guard, indicating her zanpakuto has at least taken some elements of her father's power. Now, as we've seen with Isshin and Ichigo, this doesn't mean that Ichika's zanpakuto will basically look like Zabimaru Light, but it does maybe mean it might share some abilities with Zabimaru instead. Here's hoping that if the Hell arc does happen, we get to see both of these characters in action at some point. Meanwhile, there are some other familial connections to look into as well. Returning to Isshin, we know that he's a member of the noble house of the Shiba clan, meaning he has blood relations with characters like Kaien, Ganju, and Kukaku. Now, while we only know Kaien's zanpakuto from this particular group, I've always found it interesting that each member of the family seems to command mastery over one particular element. Kaien's zanpakuto, Nejibana, controls water, while Ganju has shown he can manipulate the earth with his unique ability of Seppa. Meanwhile, and this one is a little bit more nebulous, but I've always thought Kukaku fits the idea of wind or air quite well, with her flower crane cannon designed to send people soaring through the sky. And of course the idea of fireworks, while you might rightly attribute them to fire, they are a display that takes place predominantly in the air, in sky, so I think it kind of fits. And also fire is already taken. As of course, as we know, Isshin Zanpakuto has the power of fire. So could this all be a result of their familial connection? The similarities between Engetsu and Nejibana really begin and end with the fact they each control one of the elements, but then Isshin isn't their immediate family like he is to Ichigo. Plus, the way the flames stream from the ends of Engetsu is similar to how Nejibana works, though I appreciate that is a bit more of a stretch. Another noble family to look at is of course the Kuchiki clan. While Byakuya seemingly has no family members left in the present day, we can assume that Ginrei Kuchiki, his grandfather, and Sojun Kuchiki, his father, both have Zanpakuto that are at least somewhat similar to Senbon Sakura. Now again, that doesn't mean they're identical, but particularly where Sojun was concerned as Byakuya's most direct blood relative, it almost certainly shared some characteristics, again most likely akin to the similarities between Engetsu and Zangetsu. Another noble family is Shihoin, and we see both Yoruichi and her little brother Yushiro in the source material, though both of them seem to favour hand-to-hand combat and shunko over their Zanpakuto. In fact, the vast majority of familial connections found in the world of Soul Society stem from the nobility, both upper and lower houses. Families like the Omaida, Kyoraku, and Ukitake families are all lower nobility, but we don't really get to see a lot from them at all. That being said, we know Omaida's father, Morena Shin, was once the vice-captain of the 2nd Division, so his Zanpakuto is likely similar to Gagetsuburi. I wouldn't be surprised if it was another flail of sorts, but perhaps with a differently shaped weapon this time. Meanwhile, we also know from the 1000-Year Blood War arc that Kyoraku's older brother was a Shinigami too. And it's actually kind of scary to think of a Zanpakuto that might share characteristics with Katen Kyokotsu. A cool one is actually the Fon family, which is another lower noble house, and actually a family of assassins. This brings a whole new angle, in my opinion, to Suzumabachi being Soifon's Zanpakuto. If all of her siblings shared similar Zanpakuto, maybe they all shared that two-step kill style or something akin to that, then of course that makes them the perfect fit for a family of trained killers. If all the members of the Fon family are wielding these small blades, perhaps all of them on their finger, that can kill you in just a couple of hits, then they are the perfect house of assassins, save for the fact that all of Soifon's siblings are dead. There are other siblings within the Soul Society too, though none really of note. Isane and Kyone Kotetsu, Ikaku and Shino Madarame, as well as Jidanbo and Jirobo Ikanzaka, to name just a few. That last one is particularly weird, as Jirobo's Zanpakuto is revealed to us, Sunzaki Garasu. And yet Jidanbo doesn't even seem to wield a traditional Zanpakuto at all, instead opting for his enormous hand axes. And then meanwhile, there are more unorthodox familial relationships as well, like Mairi and his daughter Nemu Kurotsuchi, but I'm not sure it counts if you build your child from scratch. But that's it for the video this time. It's just a short one, but I really wanted to talk about this as I think it is really quite an interesting topic. And again, like I said, questions have been raised around the true nature of Engetsu and its potential connection to Ichigo and Zangetsu since the very moment we first laid eyes on it, since the moment Isshin used GETSUGA TENSHO against Aizen in the Fate Karakura Town battle. And while this doesn't necessarily answer that to a totally in-depth degree, it does give us a little more of that crucial insight. And I think it does change the way you see certain characters. Like, it's intriguing to think that Ginrei Kuchiki now probably had a Zanpakuto that was at least somewhat akin to Senbon Sakura. And again, it's pretty crazy and terrifying to think of an entire family of nobles who already are extraordinarily powerful due to their status as nobility, all wielding Zanpakuto that might at least be comparable to Senbon Sakura. But yeah, that's it for the video, guys. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about this revelation? Do you like the fact that Zanpakuto can share characteristics between bloodline family members. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Were there any siblings or parental figures or relationships like that that I missed that should have been brought up at all? I think I got all the main ones, but there's always a possibility I forgot someone potentially really obvious. Do let me know in the comments below, and if there is, let me know what their zanpakuto may be like, their shared zanpakuto similarities. I'd love to see your thoughts down below. Make sure to hit subscribe if you haven't done already, guys, and until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.